The story begins in the early 1800s, a time when the oceans were the main battlegrounds for nations fighting to control trade and territory. The sea was a place of both beauty and danger. Ships sailed under bright sun and dark storms, carrying soldiers, sailors, and merchants across endless stretches of water. Among all these ships, one stood out like a shining jewel, a ship that would soon become legendary. This ship was called the HMS Victory. From the first day it touched the water, it was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It was not the biggest ship in the world, but it combined strength, speed, and power in a way that made it special. Every plank of wood, every cannon, and every sail seemed to have a purpose, as if the ship itself were alive and ready for battle. The Victory had been designed to dominate the seas. Its builders had spent months choosing the finest materials. The oak wood was strong enough to withstand the heaviest cannon fire. The ropes and sails were carefully measured so that the ship could catch the wind perfectly. Every detail mattered, because the people who designed it knew that a ship in battle had to be more than just a floating piece of wood. It had to be a weapon, a fortress, and a home for its crew all at once. The ship's cannons were placed with precision, each one able to fire long distances with deadly accuracy. Sailors and officers alike were impressed the first time they saw the ship in action. It wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of Britain's strength and ambition. The captain of the Victory was a man of strict discipline and brilliant strategy. He had spent years at sea, learning the ways of the ocean and studying the movements of enemy fleets. He was calm in the face of danger, and his sailors trusted him completely. Under his command, the ship became more than just a vessel. It became a team of people who worked together as one. Every sailor had a role, and every officer knew the plan. They drilled constantly, practicing maneuvers until they could be done without thinking. The crew learned to anticipate each other's actions, to move as if they were part of the ship itself. This unity made them almost unbeatable in smaller battles. Life on the ship was not easy. The crew had to wake before sunrise, clean the decks, check the ropes, polish the cannons, and prepare for anything that might happen during the day. The smell of salt, wood, and gunpowder was always in the air. Food was simple: hard biscuits, salted meat, and occasionally some fresh fish if they were lucky. Water was carefully rationed, and the men often went days without washing. Despite these hardships, morale was high because everyone knew they were part of something important. They were part of history, sailing on a ship that would soon be talked about for generations. Stories of the Victory spread quickly. Other ships and sailors spoke of it in awe, calling it the ship that could not be beaten. Merchants felt safer knowing the Victory was patrolling the seas. Citizens back home heard tales of its victories and celebrated it as a national treasure. The ship became a symbol not just of military power but of hope. People believed that as long as the Victory sailed the oceans, Britain's interests would be protected, and enemies would think twice before attacking. But the ship's legend was not built only on its strength or its design. It was also the people who sailed on it. The crew came from different parts of Britain, each bringing their own skills and experiences. Some were expert marksmen, others knew how to navigate by the stars, and a few were talented carpenters who could repair the ship in record time. The captain made sure everyone knew their value. He treated his crew with respect but demanded excellence. Mistakes were not tolerated in battle, but there was room for learning and growth. This balance of discipline and trust made the crew fiercely loyal. They were willing to face the deadliest storms and the strongest enemies because they believed in their captain, their ship, and each other. The Victory also had a personality of its own. Sailors would say that it seemed to anticipate danger, moving with the wind and currents as if it had a mind of its own. When battles came, it seemed to fight alongside the crew, its cannons roaring in harmony with the men shouting orders. Even in calm seas, the ship had an energy that kept the crew alert. At night, when the moon reflected on its polished decks, it looked almost magical, a ghostly figure gliding through the water. Many sailors believed that the ship itself brought them luck, and that belief gave them courage. The first few missions of the Victory were tests of its abilities. The ship faced storms that would have destroyed lesser vessels, and it survived. It encountered small enemy ships, and the Victory always came out on top. Each success added to its reputation. Stories of its speed and firepower spread among sailors in every port. Some claimed that it could outmaneuver any ship, while others said its cannons could sink an enemy before they even knew what hit them. The truth was that the ship combined careful planning, superior technology, and a dedicated crew. Together they made the Victory almost unbeatable despite all the praise. The Victory's captain knew that the real test had yet to come. Rumors of a large enemy fleet in the Atlantic reached him. This fleet was bigger and more powerful than any he had faced before. It was made up of ships from two nations, working together to challenge Britain's dominance. The captain studied maps and intelligence reports. He gathered his officers and shared his plans. Everyone understood that the coming battle would not be easy, but they also knew that their ship, their skills, and their unity gave them a chance. The Victory was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of determination, courage, and the will to face impossible odds. The crew spent days preparing. Cannons were cleaned and loaded, sails were checked, ropes were replaced. Every sailor drilled constantly, practicing maneuvers and battle routines. Even small mistakes could cost lives, so precision was critical. The captain walked the decks daily, speaking with his men, offering guidance, and inspiring confidence. He reminded them that they were not just fighting for themselves, but for their country, for their families, and for the honor of the victory. Each sailor felt a sense of pride, knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. As the ship sailed closer to the area where the enemy fleet was reported, the tension grew. Every lookout scanned the horizon for signs of enemy sails. Every sound of the wind or waves was noted and analyzed. The crew knew that the coming battle could change the course of history. They understood the risks, but they also felt ready. The ship had proven itself before, and now it was about to face a challenge unlike any other. The HMS Victory was no longer just a vessel. It was a legend in the making, a symbol of human skill, determination, and bravery, sailing steadily toward its greatest test. The story of the Victory's early days shows how greatness is not just built by strength or design, but by the people who dedicate themselves to a common purpose. The ship itself was extraordinary, but it was the combination of leadership, teamwork, and courage that set it apart. From its first journey to its preparation for the massive battle ahead, every detail mattered. Every plank, every cannon, every sailor contributed to the legend. And as the Victory sailed through the waves, it carried not just weapons and men, but the hopes and pride of a nation, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The calm of the open sea never lasts long when war is approaching, and soon the HMS Victory and its crew faced news that would change everything. Reports had come from scouts in nearby ports that a massive enemy fleet was gathering in the Atlantic. This fleet was unlike any the British had faced before. It was made up of ships from two powerful nations, joining forces to challenge Britain's control of the seas. The size of the Armada alone was enough to make the sailors anxious. Some whispered among themselves in fear, imagining hundreds of enemy ships descending upon them, while others tightened their grips on ropes and weapons, determined to stand their ground. The tension on the Victory was palpable. The captain called his officers together to discuss the news. They gathered in a small, dimly lit room below deck, maps spread out before them, candles flickering, and the smell of salt and gunpowder heavy in the air. The enemy fleet was enormous, far larger than any they had ever encountered, but the captain did not panic. He knew that sheer numbers alone did not decide the outcome of a battle. Strategy, preparation, and courage could overcome even the greatest odds. He explained that the Victory could not fight the Armada head-on in a straight battle. It would be too risky. Instead, they would need to rely on their skill, coordination, and the unique strengths of their ship to find an advantage. The officers listened intently, knowing that their lives and the lives of the crew depended on following this plan perfectly. Meanwhile, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for what was to come. Every sailor had a task, and everyone understood its importance. Some were busy cleaning and polishing the cannons, ensuring they would fire accurately and without delay. Others checked the ropes and sails, replacing any that were worn or frayed. The ship itself needed to be in perfect condition, because even a small mistake could mean disaster when facing such a large enemy force. The men worked long hours, sometimes without sleep, driven by a mix of fear and pride. They knew that their efforts could make the difference between victory and annihilation. Beyond the physical preparations, the crew also trained their minds and instincts. They ran drills to practice emergency maneuvers, learning to anticipate the movements of both their ship and the enemy. They studied the stars and the currents, preparing for the way the wind could help or hinder them in battle. Every detail mattered, because the coming confrontation would not be a simple fight. It would be a complex test of skill, courage, and endurance. The captain watched all of this with a careful eye. He encouraged the men, offering advice and reminders, but he also pushed them to be their best. Fear could not be allowed to paralyze them. Courage, discipline, and focus had to guide every action. The news of the approaching Armada spread beyond the ship. In nearby ports and towns, merchants and citizens whispered about the threat, worrying about the safety of trade routes and the future of their nation. Sailors on other ships talked about the Victory with both awe and hope. They knew that if any ship could face the enormous fleet and survive, it was the Victory. This reputation was not just a story. It was built on the successes of the past, on battles won through skill, strategy, and sheer determination. The crew carried this reputation with them, a mixture of pride and pressure weighing on their shoulders. As the Victory sailed closer to the reported location of the enemy, the tension grew almost unbearable. Every lookout scanned the horizon constantly, eyes straining for the first sign of distant sails. Every movement on the deck was performed with precision, knowing that the enemy could appear at any moment. The crew became highly alert, each man anticipating orders before they were given. The ship itself seemed to sense the change in energy, gliding through the waves with a silent determination. The wind carried whispers of the approaching storm, and the sailors could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. Days turned into nights, and the Victory remained vigilant. The men took turns keeping watch, knowing that even a moment of carelessness could cost lives. Storms rolled in, testing the skill of the sailors and the strength of the ship. Waves crashed against the hull, and rain poured down in sheets, but the Victory held steady. The crew learned to trust their instincts as much as their training. They knew the ship, its sounds, its responses to the wind and waves, and they used this knowledge to prepare for the unseen enemy. With every challenge, the bond between the men and their ship grew stronger, a connection built on mutual trust and shared purpose. Tensions ran high, but so did morale. The captain gave speeches on the deck, reminding the crew of their duty, their skill, and their honor. He spoke of the importance of courage, not just for themselves but for their country. The men listened, inspired by his confidence and leadership. They repeated drills, honed their strategies, and shared stories from previous battles to strengthen each other's resolve. Fear was present, but it was transformed into focus and determination. The victory was not just a ship. It was a symbol of resilience and hope. In the nights leading up to the expected confrontation, the crew faced moments of doubt and fear. Some men whispered about the enemy's sheer size, about how many ships they would have to fight. Others worried about their families, imagining that they might never return home. But these worries were balanced by a sense of pride and duty. Each sailor knew that their role mattered, that their actions could tip the scales. They were part of something greater than themselves, something that would be remembered for generations. Even in fear there was courage. As the victory approached the area where the Armada was reported, the captain and officers began planning their maneuvers in detail. Every cannon's position, every sailor's role, every possible movement of the ship was discussed and practiced. The crew visualized the battle, imagining the positions of the enemy ships and how they could use the victory's strengths to their advantage. They studied the wind patterns, the currents, and even the tides, knowing that nature itself could be a weapon if understood and used correctly. The anticipation was intense, and yet there was a strange calm among the men. They had done everything possible to prepare, and now they had to trust in their training, their ship, and each other. The first signs of the enemy fleet finally appeared on the horizon. Tiny silhouettes grew into shapes of massive ships, and the sailors felt a mix of awe and fear. The Armada was enormous, stretching across the waters as far as the eye could see. Some men gasped, while others tightened their grips on ropes and weapons. The captain remained calm, issuing orders in a steady voice, guiding the crew through final preparations. The Victory responded to his commands like a living thing, its sails catching the wind perfectly, its deck ready for action. The moment had arrived. The battle was not yet joined, but the challenge had reached its peak. The Victory faced an enemy far larger than any it had previously encountered, and the pressure on the crew was immense. Every decision mattered, every action could lead to survival or disaster. Yet, amid the tension, the crew felt a sense of purpose and pride. They had trained, prepared, and endured hardships together. They trusted their captain, their ship, and each other. The coming battle would test them like never before, but they were ready to rise to the challenge. The HMS Victory was about to face its greatest trial, and history waited to see if its legend would be confirmed or shattered. The story of this preparation shows more than just military readiness. It reveals the human spirit. Fear, tension, and uncertainty were everywhere, but they were met with courage, teamwork, and determination. The crew's dedication, the captain's leadership, and the ship's capabilities all combined to create a force that could face the impossible. As the enemy fleet approached, the Victory sailed forward not just as a vessel of war, but as a symbol of resilience, skill, and hope. Every sailor knew that they were part of a story that would be told for generations, and that knowledge gave them strength to face the rising challenge with courage and determination. The day of battle arrived, and with it came a tension that hung over the deck like a heavy fog. The crew of the HMS Victory had been preparing for this moment for weeks, yet nothing could fully prepare them for the sight of the massive enemy fleet stretching across the horizon. Hundreds of ships, some larger and more heavily armed than the Victory, appeared as dark shapes on the sparkling blue water. The wind blew steadily, filling the sails and carrying the salty smell of the sea, mixed with a faint scent of gunpowder as the men readied themselves. The air was thick with anticipation. Every sailor knew that today, everything they had learned, trained for, and believed in would be tested in the most extreme way. The captain climbed to the highest deck, his eyes scanning the enemy lines. Calm and focused, he gave orders with precision, his voice cutting through the noise of the wind and waves. Sailors scurried to their positions, checking cannons, adjusting ropes, and ensuring that every part of the ship was ready for the chaos to come. The Victory itself seemed to sense the critical moment. Its massive wooden hull rocked with the waves, sails fluttered in the wind, and the deck vibrated under the footsteps of determined men. Every movement was purposeful. The ship and crew moved as one, a well-practiced machine ready to strike. As the two forces drew closer, the first signals of confrontation began. The enemy fired their cannons, and the sound of thunderous explosions echoed across the water. Smoke rose in thick clouds, blurring the horizon and making it difficult to see the enemy clearly. The first shots fell around the Victory, testing its defenses, but the ship moved with skill, avoiding direct hits while returning fire with deadly accuracy. The crew worked in perfect coordination, loading, aiming, and firing cannons with speed and precision that could only come from endless practice. The intensity of the battle was overwhelming, but the sailors kept their focus, knowing that their lives, and the fate of their country, depended on every action. The victory's strategy relied on agility and intelligence rather than brute force alone. The captain directed the ship to weave through enemy lines, striking at vulnerable targets while avoiding the strongest cannons. The ship's speed and maneuverability allowed it to slip into positions where it could fire upon multiple enemy ships at once. Each successful strike was calculated, designed to cause maximum damage with minimal exposure. Enemy ships were hit, their masts splintered, their sails torn, and their cannons destroyed. The crew cheered at every victory, but there was no time for celebration. The battle raged on, and danger was never far away. The chaos of the fight escalated as the victory pressed deeper into the enemy fleet. Smoke and fire filled the air, obscuring vision and making it almost impossible to see the lines of battle. Shouts of orders, cries of pain, and the constant roar of cannon fire created a soundscape of terror and determination. The deck shook as cannonballs struck the hull, splintering wood and sending shards flying. Sailors held their positions, gripping ropes, loading guns, and helping injured comrades. Every second was a struggle for survival and a test of courage. The men of the Victory were exhausted, but their training and teamwork kept them moving, allowing the ship to continue striking with precision. Amid the chaos, the captain spotted the enemy flagship, a massive vessel that commanded respect and fear. He realized that hitting the ship would disrupt the entire Armada. With careful planning and daring execution, the Victory moved into position. The crew knew the risk striking the flagship would put them directly in the line of the heaviest fire, but they trusted their captain and their ship. The cannons roared, and the enemy flagship shuddered under the impact of precise, devastating shots. Fire spread across its deck, sails were shredded, and confusion rippled through the enemy lines. The morale of the Armada began to waver as the Victory continued its relentless assault. The battle continued for hours, with neither side willing to yield. Enemy ships tried to surround the Victory, to cut it off and destroy it with sheer numbers. But the ship's agility and the crew's skill kept it one step ahead. They dodged incoming fire, returned devastating shots, and moved with a coordination that was almost uncanny. Sailors shouted encouragement, patched small damages quickly, and ensured that every cannon remained ready. Injuries and exhaustion mounted, but the men refused to give in. The intensity of the critical moment demanded absolute focus and unwavering courage, and the crew rose to the occasion. As the day progressed, the Victory's actions began to have a dramatic effect on the enemy fleet. Ships collided, caught fire, or were forced to retreat under the relentless pressure. The precision of the Victory's maneuvers caused chaos among the Armada. What had begun as a massive threat in formation now resembled a fleet in disorder. Enemy commanders struggled to regain control, but the skill and audacity of the Victory's crew kept them off balance. Every successful strike reinforced the ship's legend, showing that even against impossible odds, courage, skill, and strategy could dominate the battlefield. In the heat of battle, the Victory's crew faced moments of fear and doubt. Cannons exploded dangerously close, smoke stung their eyes, and the cries of the injured weighed heavily on everyone. Yet, each sailor found courage in the actions of those around them. The sense of unity and shared purpose was overwhelming. Men who had never fought together before in their lives now moved as a single, unstoppable force. The ship itself seemed to respond to the courage and determination of its crew, cutting through the chaos with power and precision. By late afternoon, the critical moment of the battle arrived. The enemy fleet, already shaken by the Victory's relentless attacks, began to crumble. Ships were destroyed, some burned, and others surrendered. The captain guided the ship carefully through the disordered Armada, striking where it mattered most. The once mighty enemy fleet now faced devastation on a scale few had imagined possible. The courage, skill, and determination of the crew had turned what seemed like certain disaster into a tactical masterpiece. The HMS Victory had become the center of an unfolding legend, its name spreading like wildfire among both allies and enemies. The final hours of the battle tested every ounce of endurance the crew had. Sailors were tired, hungry, and injured, but the fight was not yet over. The captain continued to issue orders, coordinating every shot, every maneuver, and every boarding party. Even when the ship rocked violently under heavy fire, the crew held firm, maintaining the structure and discipline that had carried them this far. The battle had become a combination of strategy, courage, and raw endurance, a test of the human spirit as much as the strength of the ship. As night fell, the smoke began to clear, revealing the extent of the destruction. The enemy Armada was in ruins, with ships burned, sunk, or scattered across the sea. The HMS Victory had not only survived but had achieved something unprecedented. It had shattered an entire Armada, a feat that would be remembered for generations. The crew, exhausted but victorious, stood together on the deck, taking in the scale of what they had accomplished. They had faced overwhelming odds and emerged triumphant, proving the power of preparation, skill, and unity. Even after the battle ended, the danger was not completely over. Fires still burned on some enemy ships, debris floated in the water, and the risk of further attacks remained. Yet the crew remained vigilant, helping each other and tending to the wounded. The victory was hard-won, and it required attention and care even after the fighting stopped. Through this critical moment, the sailors of the Victory learned more about themselves and their capabilities than they had ever imagined. They had seen the edge of disaster and had pulled back from it through courage, skill, and determination. The story of this battle shows how a single ship, guided by a capable captain and crew, could face overwhelming odds and achieve the impossible. The critical moment was not just about firing cannons or maneuvering the ship. It was about courage, unity, and unwavering focus. Every decision mattered, every action counted, and every sailor's contribution played a part in the outcome. The HMS Victory had proven itself not only as a powerful vessel but as a symbol of determination and human excellence in the face of almost certain destruction by the end of the day. The ship and its crew had created a story that would be told for centuries. Tales of their bravery, precision, and skill spread quickly, inspiring sailors, citizens, and leaders alike. The Victory had entered legend not merely because of its size or cannons but because of the people who sailed it and the courage they showed in the most critical moment imaginable. Every plank, every rope, every cannon, and every sailor had played a part in a battle that would define history. The ship had not only survived but had rewritten the rules of naval warfare, showing what was possible when preparation, courage, and determination met opportunity on the high seas. The battle had finally ended, and for the crew of the HMS Victory, a strange mixture of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief filled the air. The seas, which had been roaring with cannon fire, smoke, and chaos just hours before, were now eerily calm. Pieces of broken masts and splintered wood floated among the waves, a stark reminder of the destruction that had taken place. Fires still burned on some of the shattered enemy ships, sending thin columns of smoke into the sky. The crew stood on the deck, looking out over the aftermath, trying to comprehend the scale of what they had achieved. They had faced a massive armada, a force that seemed impossible to overcome. And yet, through courage, skill, and determination, they had done the impossible. The Victory had survived and prevailed, earning a place in history that no one would ever forget. The captain walked among the crew, inspecting the damage to the ship and checking on the men. Despite the exhaustion etched into every face, there was a quiet pride in their eyes. Injured sailors were being tended to by those who could still stand, while others cleaned and repaired the deck as best they could. The Victory was not without its cost. Some of the men had been injured, and a few had paid the ultimate price in the heat of battle. Each life lost was felt deeply, a reminder that even the greatest triumphs often come with sorrow. Yet in this moment, the sense of accomplishment and survival outweighed the grief. They had faced overwhelming odds and had emerged not just alive, but victorious. The Victory itself bore the marks of the battle. Cannonballs had struck its hull, leaving deep dents and splinters in the strong oak. Some sails were torn, and ropes had been shredded, yet the ship remained steadfast. Its design, combined with the skill of the crew, had allowed it to withstand the punishment that would have sunk lesser vessels. Every crew member understood that the ship's resilience had been as important as their own courage. It had carried them through the storm of fire and chaos, keeping them afloat when defeat seemed almost certain. That the ship was more than wood and metal, it had become a symbol of endurance, a living monument to the bravery and skill of those who sailed her. As the smoke began to clear and the remaining enemy ships retreated or surrendered, the Victory's crew took stock of what had happened. They gathered on the deck, sharing stories of narrow escapes, daring maneuvers, and moments when they had thought all was lost. Some laughed nervously at the memories of chaos and confusion, while others spoke in hushed tones of the fear they had felt as cannon fire rained down. In these conversations, they began to realize the extraordinary feat they had accomplished. Against overwhelming odds, the HMS Victory had not only survived but had crushed an entire armada. The scale of the achievement was almost unbelievable, even to those who had lived it. The captain called a meeting of his officers to plan the next steps. Even though the battle was over, there was work to be done. They needed to ensure the safety of the ship, tend to the wounded, and secure any prisoners or valuable resources from the defeated fleet. Officers moved quickly, coordinating repairs, distributing food and water, and organizing watches to keep the crew alert. Despite the exhaustion, there was no room for carelessness. The sea was unpredictable, and another threat could appear at any moment. Every man understood that victory required responsibility, not just courage. They had won the battle, but survival depended on continued vigilance. News of the Victory's achievement began to spread quickly. Other ships in the British fleet heard of the incredible feat, and stories traveled from port to port. Sailors, merchants, and citizens alike marveled at the audacity and skill of the ship and its crew. The Victory had become a legend overnight, a name spoken with awe and respect. Even the enemies who survived recounted tales of its power and precision, describing the ship as almost supernatural in its effectiveness. The reputation of the HMS Victory would endure for generations, inspiring future sailors and serving as a symbol of what could be achieved through courage, preparation, and unity. Amid the celebrations and pride, the crew also reflected on the human cost of the battle. Sailors who had lost friends or comrades in the heat of combat felt a heavy weight on their hearts. They knew that victory came at a price, and that price was measured in lives lost and sacrifices made. Yet there was also a sense of purpose in what they had done. They had protected their country, defended their homes, and upheld the honor of the ship. The pain of loss was balanced by the knowledge that their actions had changed the course of history, securing a legacy that would be remembered far beyond their own lifetimes. The captain himself spent long hours on the deck, walking among the men, listening to their stories, and offering words of encouragement. He understood the importance of morale and of acknowledging both the courage and the suffering of his crew. He praised those who had performed extraordinary acts of bravery, and he comforted those who mourned their fallen comrades. His leadership had been crucial during the battle, and now it was just as important in the aftermath. He reminded the men that their collective effort, their trust in one another, and their dedication to the ship had made the victory possible. It was not a single person's achievement, but the triumph of a team united in purpose. Repairing the ship became the next priority. Sailors worked tirelessly to mend torn sails, replace broken ropes, and patch splintered wood. Every repair was done with care, knowing that the victory would soon be called upon again. Even in the aftermath of such a monumental battle, the crew understood that their mission was not complete. The sea was unpredictable, and the lessons they had learned from this confrontation would be tested again in future conflicts. Through their hard work, the victory was restored not only to functionality but to readiness for the challenges that lay ahead. The aftermath of the battle also brought reflection on strategy and skill. Officers reviewed every maneuver, every shot, and every decision that had contributed to the success of the engagement. They studied the weaknesses of the enemy, the strengths of their own tactics, and the role of the ship's unique design in achieving victory. This analysis was not just academic. It was essential for improving future performance. Lessons learned from such a critical moment would guide the British Navy for years to come. The victory's crew understood that history would remember not only their bravery but also their intelligence and strategy. The experience forged an unbreakable bond among the crew. Men who had faced fire, chaos, and near-death together developed a connection that went beyond friendship. They had relied on each other completely, and that trust had been rewarded with survival and triumph. The shared hardships and triumphs created a sense of unity that was rare and profound. Even after the battle, the memory of these moments strengthened the crew's identity and pride. They were no longer just sailors. They were survivors of an extraordinary ordeal, part of a legendary story that would outlast their own lives. The captain also took time to reflect on the human cost and the responsibility of leadership. He knew that every decision he had made had affected lives, and that the burden of command was heavy. Yet he also understood that his leadership had been instrumental in achieving a victory that had seemed impossible. The balance of courage, wisdom, and decisiveness had made all the difference. He felt a deep sense of respect for his crew, recognizing their bravery, skill, and resilience. The bond between captain, officers, and sailors was stronger than ever, built on mutual trust and shared experiences in the most extreme circumstances. As the victory sailed back toward friendly waters, the crew looked toward the future with a mixture of hope and determination. They had faced the greatest challenge of their lives and emerged victorious. But they knew that the sea would always present new dangers. The lessons they had learned, the skills they had honed, the courage they had displayed would serve them well in the battles to come. They had become not only a legendary crew but a symbol of what could be achieved when preparation, teamwork, and courage were combined. The ship itself carried a new aura, a presence that inspired both awe and confidence wherever it sailed. The story of the HMS Victory's resolution is more than just a tale of military success. It is a story of human endurance, courage, and responsibility. The crew faced death, destruction, and chaos, and yet they managed to triumph through skill, preparation, and unity. They repaired their ship, tended to the wounded, and reflected on the cost of victory. Understanding that true triumph requires both courage and humility, their actions would be remembered for generations. A testament to what can be achieved when people work together toward a common goal, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The final days after the battle were a time of pride, reflection, and preparation. Sailors shared stories of bravery, officers analyzed strategy, and the captain guided his men with wisdom and compassion. The HMS Victory had survived its greatest trial, but the experience had transformed everyone on board. They had witnessed the power of teamwork, the importance of preparation, and the necessity of courage under pressure. As they sailed toward home, they knew that their actions would inspire others, and that the legend of the victory would live on long after the battle itself had ended. The ship and its crew had not only won a battle, they had proven the extraordinary capabilities of human skill, determination, and unity in the face of impossible odds. The battle was over, and the HMS Victory had returned from the storm of gunfire, smoke, and chaos to calmer waters. The crew, weary and battered, finally had a chance to breathe, to look at what they had accomplished, and to reflect on the enormity of their experience. They had survived the impossible, faced an enemy fleet that seemed too powerful to defeat, and emerged victorious. Yet the victory was not just about the battle itself. It was about everything that came before, during, and after the preparation. The courage, the teamwork, the sacrifices, and the lessons learned. Each sailor carried memories that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, and each would forever remember the day the victory changed history. Returning to familiar waters brought a strange mix of relief and reflection. The crew walked the deck, inspecting the damage and attending to what remained of the ship. Some ropes were frayed, sails torn, and wood splintered from cannon fire. Every mark on the ship told a story, a memory of the battle, a moment when skill or courage had made the difference between survival and destruction. The men who had faced death together now shared a quiet bond, one that could never be broken. They had trusted each other with their lives, and that trust had been proven correct in the most extraordinary circumstances. The captain, as always, moved among his crew, speaking to them with a mix of pride and concern. He praised their bravery and skill, but he also reminded them of the cost of war. Many had been injured, and some had lost their lives in the heat of battle. Each loss weighed heavily on his mind, and he made sure that the sacrifices were acknowledged and honored. He understood that leadership was not just about giving orders, it was about understanding the burden of responsibility, about guiding people through the hardest moments, and about helping them find meaning in their actions. His calm presence and wise words helped the crew begin to process what they had experienced. The sense of triumph was undeniable, but so was the weight of history. The HMS Victory had done something that few ships, if any, had ever achieved. It had defeated an entire armada almost single-handedly. The crew understood that their actions would be remembered, that their story would be told and retold, and that their courage and skill would inspire generations of sailors. They had become part of a living legend. Yet, even as they celebrated, they also reflected on the lives lost and the destruction caused. Victory was not simple. It came with responsibility and reflection, and the sailors carried both pride and sorrow in their hearts. As they sailed toward home, the men took time to share their experiences. Some told stories of moments when they had feared for their lives, when cannon fire exploded dangerously close, or when they had seen comrades fall. Others spoke of daring maneuvers, clever tactics, or moments of luck that had saved the ship and crew. In these conversations, they realized how much they had learned about themselves, about teamwork, and about courage under pressure. The battle had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of character, and the crew had passed with distinction. The captain also reflected on the lessons of the battle. He thought about strategy, about decisions that had worked and those that had required quick thinking, and about the importance of preparation. He knew that their success was the result of meticulous planning, unshakable discipline, and the courage of every man on board. He also recognized that victory required humility, the ability to learn from mistakes, and the wisdom to respect the power of the sea and the unpredictability of war. His reflections were not just personal, they shaped the way he would lead in the future, ensuring that the crew of the Victory would remain ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Back on the deck, the crew continued to care for the ship and themselves. Injuries were treated, supplies were replenished, and repairs continued. Even in the aftermath of victory, vigilance was necessary. The ocean was unpredictable, and the crew had learned that danger could arise at any moment. This period of reflection and recovery allowed the men to regain strength, to bond further, and to internalize the lessons of the battle. They had survived one of the most intense naval engagements in history, and they knew that preparation, skill, and courage were key to facing any future challenges. The story of the HMS Victory also became a tale of inspiration. Sailors on other ships and citizens in ports and towns learned about the incredible feat. The legend of a single ship taking on an entire armada spread quickly, inspiring awe and admiration. The victory became a symbol of courage, resilience, and the extraordinary results that could come from preparation and teamwork. Even the surviving members of the enemy fleet spoke of the ship in reverent tones, recognizing the skill and strategy that had led to their defeat. The story would be told for generations, reminding people of the power of determination and unity. Reflection on the human cost remained an essential part of the aftermath. The crew understood that war, even victorious war, left scars that were not only physical but emotional. They mourned for those lost, for the families left behind, and for the lives affected by the destruction. At the same time, they recognized the importance of their actions in defending their country and securing a future for those they cared about. Victory was a complex experience, a mixture of joy, pride, grief, and reflection. The men had learned that courage often comes with sacrifice, and that true heroism involves both bravery and responsibility. The Victory itself became a symbol of everything the crew had accomplished. Its hull bore the marks of battle, each scar a story of survival and triumph. Its sails, though torn in places, still held the wind with skillful precision. The ship was more than just wood and metal. It was a living testament to human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Every sailor on board understood the importance of maintaining and honoring the ship, for it represented not just a vessel but the spirit of determination and unity that had carried them through the most critical moments of their lives. The days following the battle were filled with a sense of reflection and learning. Officers and crew reviewed their actions, discussed strategies, and considered how they might improve in future conflicts. The experiences of the battle became lessons in leadership, coordination, and problem-solving under extreme pressure. Every sailor had contributed to the success, and their efforts would be remembered and studied. This reflection ensured that the crew was not only celebrating their triumph but also preparing for the future, understanding that history favors those who learn from their experiences. As the HMS Victory sailed closer to home, the crew began to feel a mixture of relief and anticipation. The journey back was quieter than the battle, but the thoughts and reflections of the men were intense. They thought about their families, about the recognition they would receive, and about the stories they would tell for the rest of their lives. Some gazed at the horizon, lost in thought, while others repaired what remained of the ship or cared for their fellow sailors. The sense of purpose and pride was strong, mingled with the sobering knowledge of the costs they had endured. The legacy of the Victory's journey became clear, even before they reached home. This was more than a victory at sea. It was a story that would inspire generations. The ship, its captain, and its crew had shown what could be achieved when preparation, courage, and unity combined. They had faced nearly impossible odds and had emerged not only alive but victorious, creating a legend that would live on in history books, songs, and the memories of all who heard the tale. The battle was over, but the lessons and inspiration would last forever. Finally, as the HMS Victory docked safely in port, the crew disembarked, greeted by cheering crowds and admiring officials. Their triumph was celebrated, their courage honored, and their story became part of national pride. Yet, even amid the celebration, the men carried the quiet reflection of what they had endured. They had faced death, chaos, and overwhelming odds. They had lost friends, fought bravely, and learned the true meaning of unity and perseverance. This victory was not just a moment in time. It was a testament to the extraordinary potential of human skill, courage, and determination. The sailors of the Victory would never forget what they had achieved or the lessons they had learned. They had seen the edge of danger, confronted fear, and emerged victorious through teamwork, preparation, and unwavering courage. The ship itself would be remembered not only as a powerful vessel but as a symbol of the human spirit, capable of extraordinary feats when guided by intelligence, discipline, and determination. Every plank, rope, and cannon had played a part in the triumph, and every sailor had contributed to a story that would echo through history. The reflection on this experience shaped not only the crew's understanding of war but also their understanding of themselves. They learned the value of preparation, the importance of courage in the face of fear, and the power of unity and teamwork. They realized that true leadership requires both wisdom and compassion, and that every individual action can have consequences far beyond the immediate moment. These lessons, learned on the deck of a ship in the middle of an ocean, would guide them for the rest of their lives, influencing the choices they made, the way they led, and the stories they told in the years that followed. The legend of the HMS Victory grew. It became a symbol of courage, strategy, and determination, inspiring sailors, leaders, and citizens alike. The story of a single ship facing an overwhelming enemy fleet and emerging victorious captured the imagination of all who heard it. But behind the legend were real people, men who had risked everything, who had worked together under unimaginable pressure, and who had proven that extraordinary outcomes are possible when courage, skill, and determination are combined. The victory was not just theirs, it belonged to everyone who believed in the power of preparation, teamwork, and resilience. The story of the Victory and its crew reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, greatness is possible. It shows that courage, determination, and unity can overcome fear and chaos. It demonstrates the importance of preparation, skill, and leadership, and it teaches that every action, no matter how small, can have a profound impact. The ship, the captain, and the sailors created a legacy that would last far beyond their lifetimes, a testament to the power of human spirit and the enduring impact of courage and teamwork. Their journey, their battle, and their victory continue to inspire, reminding us that with preparation, skill, and determination, even the most impossible challenges can be overcome.